Good morning, everyone. Welcome back. So I thought I was going to just jump straight in and show you guys Mrs. Rabbit's currant buns recipe. But then I started researching to rewrite the blog post and make sure I had like the authentic British currant bun, make sure I had the right recipe. And then I started going, quite frankly, down the rabbit hole. And I came across all these little tidbits. And as much as I put that stuff into the blog post, I really try to summarize it so it's really scannable. And it's not like a place where you get to geek out. So I was like, yes, I'm talking on YouTube. So that way I can share it with all of you guys. I was like, oh my gosh, this is so neat. Because when I was reading up on things, I was like, oh, that makes sense why British baking, you have things like fruit pies, like fruit cakes and mince pies and tea cakes and so on, that has all the raisins and the currants and so on. And because what I came across is that sugar, although it's been available in the UK from the 11th century apparently, things like currants and raisins were actually used as the sweetener for many, many centuries because sugar was quite a luxury item. It really wasn't available into the mainstream until the 18th century, I think it is. So yeah, so it was really kind of neat because it makes better sense when we're seeing all these British recipes, all these things that we're like, yeah, we know those are quite British. There's a reason behind that. So I thought I'd kind of just, I don't know, take you guys through some of the little bits and bobs that I came across. So currants, I think before I jump in, I need to clarify the differences. So we are talking about Zante or Zante currants. They are different from black currants. So Zante currants come from a grape. And if we're talking about black currants, the type that you might see in jams and preserves, that comes from a bush. So completely different plants altogether. So the Zante currant first came into the English market in the 14th century. So they were originally produced in Greece. That was the main market. And they were known as Razizians de currants. I think that's how you pronounce it. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's okay. But you can already hear, you're like, oh, that's where you're getting currants from. You can kind of hear it. In the 16th century, it starts to shift, so the name becomes raisins of Corinth. So the spelling, it's hard when I'm talking about it, but it's the spelling has actually changed. So we've gone from currants to Corinth, and eventually currants takes on the name of the place, but then currants change to currant. 17th century, the production shifts to another island in Greece, Zakynthos, I think. I could be completely butchering this, in which case I'm so sorry. But that's why it's also known, the shortened term is Zante or Zante, and that's where you get Zante currant. So that's how a name comes about. So you get currant from Corinth and Zante from the second location, and then they merge together. So that's why you know what type of currant you're using. In terms of currants coming onto the market in England, so yeah, 14th century is when it was really introduced. By the 16th century, so again we're talking 200 years, trade is fully booming. It has any currants that are being produced in Greece, basically the English market just swallows it up. It is in such demand. It is a luxury item, but currants are one of those things that the everyday person can still afford. So it's a luxury, but it's still accessible. So that's why around the 16th century, you will start to see shifts in some of the recipes, and you're starting to see currants coming in. Well, not that they've come in, but you're going to definitely see them very prominently all established in those recipes for things like fruit cakes and mince pies and so on, and currant buns and spice buns and hot cross buns, just because that was how things were sweetened at that time. So what else was there? Oh yeah, I came across a really neat article when I was reading. I was like, there was a complete illegal trade going on around currants at that time. There was a company that had complete monopoly over the market, obviously being a luxury item as well. People would have been trying to like evade tax and so on. So like there was like, I was reading someone's paper or their essay on like the legal trade of currants in the UK, and I was like, wow, that's a thing. Because I mean, you know, for us, we just go down to the shops and we have access to sugars and currants and so on, and it's just there. But we forget that, you know, at one point this wasn't as easily accessible. So yeah, it was just kind of cool. Anyways, back to the currant buns. So when I was, sorry, I'm not even looking at you guys, I'm just looking at my notes here. But currant buns is where I started. I wanted to make sure that I was trying to create the correct one, because currant buns can mean anything. Like at the end of the day, it is a generic term. You know, hot crust buns are considered a currant bun. Spiced buns, you've got the Chelsea bun, the Colston bun. They are all currant buns. However, when you start looking at them, something like the Colston bun doesn't just feature currants. You also have candied peel, spices, then also like a sugar syrup glaze. Spice buns, obviously you have spices added to it. The hot crust bun, as I found out, is the exact same as the spice bun, except for it has slightly less milk because it needs to have a firm dough so you can cut the crosses in. So it's really quite neat, kind of like looking and exploring. There is, if you guys want to look into this yourself, here we go. This is the book that you guys want to look into. So it's Elizabeth David. She was a food writer, and she's got a series of different books that she's known for, but she wrote English Bread and Yeast Cookery. This is your Bible for English baking. So in here is where I found the recipe, and I've just adapted it so it's a bit more modernized, and I had to change some ingredients amounts and so on. But she was saying that a lot of the buns, the recipes in some cases are the exact same as what you would have for a bread loaf. It's just that they're smaller size. What she ended up doing was just putting them into two different chapters just to clarify the differences. But she clarifies it as, so buns are a small, soft, plump, sweet, fermented cake. And she uses that definition from John Kirkland's The Baker's ABC. That's from the 1920s. The recipe I ended up going with was like a currant bun in its most simplest form. So it is yeast based. So it does have a little bit of a rise time of an hour. And then I think I have like another 20 minutes just before it goes in the oven. But it's really quite manageable. It's not like you have to have these rise overnight or whatever. There were a few tips that did help. She notes that these buns really should just be like lightly sweetened. So this cookbook is obviously far more modern. It's from the 1900s. So there is sugar involved, but it's really not a huge amount. It's just, again, lightly sweetened. The fat content needs to be kept low, so there's only a little bit of butter in it. And there's the recommendation when it comes to currants to warm them before you mix them. There's something about the cold currants and mixing them in with like the dough. Basically, it just helps it mix together better, and also it keeps it from like having a deadening effect is what they call it. And you just don't want it to be dense or anything kind of dropping as well. So I think that's that. I found it kind of neat. I was like, oh, I need to share this. This is kind of fun. So with that, I'm going to jump in and take you guys through how to make Mrs. Rabbit's currant buns. So to make this, you are going to take a measuring cup that is microwave safe. You're going to pour in 1 1/4 cups of 2% milk. And you're also going to pop in 4 tablespoons of unsalted butter. You do want this to be room temperature, otherwise it's going to take just a little bit longer to microwave. But you're going to pop that in the microwave at 50% power for 2 minutes, and you're going to stir that halfway. So the milk is going to be warm when you touch it, but it shouldn't be scalding hot. You are going to whisk in 1 large egg. Again, you want that to be room temperature. Just use a fork and just whisk that all together until it's combined. And then you're going to be stirring in 2 teaspoons of dry yeast and a 1/4 cup of granulated, also known as white sugar. In a large microwave safe mixing bowl, you are going to pour in 1/3 of a cup of currants. You're going to pop those into the microwave and just have that at 100% power for 40 seconds. Again, you're going to stir that halfway. You just want that just to warm those up, but they aren't going to be hot. Into that bowl, you are going to stir in 4 cups of all-purpose flour, and you're also going to pop in a pinch of salt. Give that all a really good stir to mix that together, and then you're going to pour in the milk mixture and stir that until a dough is formed. You're going to pop a tea towel over that and just set that aside in a warm spot for 1 hour just to rise. Once you're getting close to that 1 hour mark, you're going to want to preheat your oven. If you have a conventional oven, you want that to be at 400 degrees Fahrenheit or 200 degrees Celsius. And you're going to take 2 baking trays and line that with baking paper or parchment paper, whichever one you want to call it. With the dough, you are going to split that into 20 small buns. You can make them smaller or larger, but I found this was just the right amount of size where I can fit them evenly onto the 2 baking trays. So pop those on. You're going to cover those with a tea towel and just let that rise for another 20 minutes. By this point, your oven should definitely be preheated. So you're going to pop those in and you're going to bake those for 15 minutes. They should just be nice and golden brown. You're going to remove that from the oven, let them cool for 15 minutes. And during this time, we are going to take 1 cup of confectioners, also known as icing sugar, and 2 tablespoons of 2% milk. Give that a good mix together just with a fork. And then you can take a spoon and drizzle that over each bun. Just to have a little bit of a glaze on top. It adds just like that little bit of extra sweetness, which is really nice. You want to just let that dry for 20 minutes and then serve. If you want to pop these into the freezer, because this is what I did, you will want to let them dry for a few more hours just so there's no extra moisture before you pop those into the freezer so you don't get that ice around them. Anyways, I hope you guys have enjoyed this recipe. Taking a little deep dive into the tale of Peter Rabbit and the history of currants. And with that, I will see you guys in the next video.